Greetings, everyone. My name is Kali Akuno. I want to apologize to everyone who tried to join us at the end of May. We had some technical difficulties, I think, on both sides trying to pull this together. Just a conversation about the uses and abuses or misuses of the just transition framework. And we want to talk about the case of South Africa, what many of us call Azania. And we're really looking at that because, in many respects, whether one agrees or disagrees with the stated policy of the ANC government, the truth of the matter is they're one of the governments that have gone the furthest in at least articulating a commitment to address transition. Now, whether that's lip service or whether that's real, we're going to discuss and debate a little bit of that. With our honored guest, Phethani Madzivhandila. Man, your last name always kills me, brother. Madzivhandila.
Madzivhandila. It's very difficult to read. I know. Now just stick to the first name. The surname is difficult to read.
No, I'm gonna get it right, man. It's my duty to get it right, to learn and get it right. I may not get it right today, y'all, but it is my duty to learn another language. I'm not going to be one of these. I'm trying my best not to be one of these showing my Americanness, as we say, the limitation of and the lack of linguistic diversity. So y'all forgive me for a bad American education, but it's my duty to overcome that, to strive to overcome that. But in any event, Phethani, thank you for joining us. Glad we could reschedule this. I know you're on the move and on the run. So I want to get, kind of straight into it. If you can, I want to set everybody up with just a few-minute breakdown of the nature of kind of the energy crisis, which has been confronting South Africa, the last couple of years, right? With the water shortages, the energy shortages, there's some real critical problems with the infrastructure going on in the country. So if you can describe that just a little bit first to paint a picture of what is happening on the day-to-day in South Africa relative to the energy, how that's affecting, kind of the economy, which those of us who've been, like myself, been tracking it, we know it's kind of contracting, and there's a lot of internal contradictions with how it's being managed, with rampant corruption at the highest, levels to a certain degree. So if you can paint a picture of that, and then I want us to talk about how the ANC government came about adopting the transition framework. Yeah,
you can hear me, right?
You, yes. Can you hear me, Phethani?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, yeah. So I'm just saying you can go ahead. If you can start with that first question, we can go from there.
Okay. Greetings, everyone. My name is Phethani Madzivhandila, based in South Africa, in Pretoria. And I'm an organizer and a member of the Walter Rodney People's Library, where we promote popular pedagogy and political and ideological training of young comrades, of course, towards the leftist tradition of politics. But let me just dive into it, as Kali has asked, about the nature of the energy crisis in South Africa. The crisis has really reached its zenith after July last year, where we experienced over 8 hours of power cuts during a day, where it normally we will experience 2 or 3 hours power cuts a day before last year in July. But to really get into the depth and the crux of the challenges, one has to look into the fact that when Eskom, our power utility, was established in during apartheid time, it was only designed to cater for the white population. And as you know, in South Africa, we have less than 10% of the white population in the country. The rest are black and Indians and colored people. So it meant that when we transited, when we came into 1994, post independence or post democracy, we had to increase the generation capacity of our power utility. And the government, under the then president of the country, Thabo Mbeki, in 1999, was presented with a white paper by energy experts at Eskom to say that in a few years' time, you should have increased your generation capacity. True to their neoliberal sense, they did not heed the warning that came from experts who were giving them warnings that if you don't increase the generation capacity or of the power utility by around 2006 or 2007, this is 1999. They are projecting that 2006, 2007, you will start to have power cuts in the country due to the growing demand of electricity and bringing in new people who were previously excluded from the power grid, and of course, who are the majority of the people in the country. And then later on, only around 2006, 2007, the construction of 2 new power plants was commissioned by the then President Thabo Mbeki. Was still the president, still even in 2006, 2007. But later, around 2007, he will then present at Parliament that actually they were wrong to refuse to increase the power generation and not listen to energy experts. And unfortunately for us, around the time when we started constructing these 2 new power stations, of course, we had to take out loans from IMF and other people who are willing to give us money. Unfortunately, 2008 happened, the financial meltdown in the US. So it affected everything that we're trying to do in terms of building the power station. So the costs which were projected tripled because of the financial meltdown in 2008. Things started to become more expensive, but also importantly, one must be able to contextualize it in the sense that there was an issue of corruption which was happening within the ruling party, where there was procurement fraud, where the people will inflate prices, and therefore it will lead into this crisis of not having enough electricity. So between 2007, actually, the last power station which was being constructed since 2007 was finished last year. If it only started to be operational last year, since 2007. And through changes in, with leadership in the government, it slowed down the issue of bringing in a new power station into the grid. But also importantly, what one needs to understand is that there was a challenge in terms of policy direction at the level of the state after Thabo Mbeki left office and then Jacob Zuma took over. The issue now then became a contestation to try and deal with the energy crisis in the country, to try and rope in nuclear energy to also supplement the shortages of energy in the country. But that took a very difficult turn because the primary funders of this nuclear power stations that we're trying to build were going to be the Russians. And of course, there was going to be resistance in terms of people who align themselves with the West, that why are you bringing in Russia to help you with the construction of this power plant? And within that back and forth and fighting in boardrooms between politicians, it has led and exaggerated the crisis that we are facing in the country right now in terms of load shedding. But importantly, one must be able to clarify that there is no engineering crisis in Eskom. Speaking with my engineering background, understanding how the process of making electricity is simple. Everyone in the world is making electricity the same way. So if we have a peculiar engineering problem in South Africa of making electricity, we can just compare notes with other countries that, hey, how are you doing? How are you dealing with the challenge? How are you dealing with this technical challenge? that is happening in the plant, and then we can be able to apply it in our local context. But what has then since happened since Jacob Zuma left parliament, left the presidency of the country, and then Cyril Ramaphosa came in. It was around the time when the just transition discourse was starting to gain traction also in South Africa. That no, we need to transition and move beyond coal. So then the issue then became that now when you are trying to bring in new players to the market, it means that now we have to try and decommission our coal-based plants. Because remember, we have a lot of coal in South Africa. We have a lot of coal that is enough to last us at least the next 200 years, which has not been started to be mined. It is still there, right? But then the problem that then now becomes that in 2021, 2 years back, in 2021, the German government offered us and a couple of good million US dollars to say, look, guys, we're giving you money so that you can be able to decommission your coal power plants, and so that we can speak around the issues of just transition. And that happened around April this year. There was a coal power plant which was decommissioned. That power plant was producing around 120 megawatts of electricity, and then now it has been changed into it was producing 1,200, and now it is producing 200 megawatts. So that's the deficit of over 1,000 megawatts that has been taken off the grid. And also, of course, it is going to contribute to the crisis and the challenge of energy in the country. So since then, the issue that we have been facing primarily was that the engineering challenges, which were supposed to have been dealt with in 1999 by increasing the capacity, by also servicing the power plants all the time so that they can be able to have a long life, that has not been done. And it has led into the slow deterioration of our power plants in the country, and therefore it has led into deficit of power. But in reality, over 80% of our electricity is still being produced primarily by coal, with one nuclear power station based in Cape Town in Quebec. But overall, and these new renewable energy plants which have been introduced in the country, but in general, we are still largely dependent on coal, and we are in a challenge of what we have framed as just transition. How do we imagine just transition towards a just economical world in which the workers who are currently working at Eskom have their needs to be taken care of when we transit to renewable energy? And one of the biggest challenges that we're still facing generally in the renewable energy sector across globally is the crisis of being able to supply base load. And if we are able to if we're able to reach that technological advancement where we're able to supply the minimum base load that we need for generation of electricity, then the question of just transition will not be a challenge. But also importantly, it is important to look at the question of just transition through also the eyes of imperialism and the global powers, and especially the global north. As I said earlier on, that Germany gave us money to decommission our coal plant, and which one has been done already by the administration of Ramaphosa. But when the war broke out in Ukraine, they went back and used their coal plants in Germany. Guess where they're buying that coal from? They're buying it from South Africa. The same people who are telling us to stop using coal, right? So it becomes a very difficult issue that how do we move away from coal? But at the same time, the same people who are giving us money to move away from coal are buying coal from us. Actually, in one of my rants, whenever I'm just feeling pissed off by all this situation, I normally say that we are going to ban coal until Jesus comes back, because these people are not coming to the game. So it's very difficult to even imagine a just transition world where we are using renewable energy.
So just to follow up, to be clear, the plant that the Germans just recently, helped to complete, is that running on nuclear, or is it what kind of fuel is it actually running on? Or is that hydroelectric?
No,
What is
yeah. So this new plant that was running that was producing 1,200 megawatts. Now it's producing 200 megawatts. It is running on renewable energy. So it's using wind energy to produce electricity, and also solar, doubling
also solar.
with the two.
Okay. And where's most of the solar? Where are solar cells coming from? Is that primarily from China, or is that primarily from European manufacturers, or is that you don't know at this point? I'm asking for certain kind of strategic questions, part of which is some of this conversation as a subtext, to the BRICS discussion, of which South Africa is deeply embroiled in right now, and all the controversy around, whether what's the charge, whether Putin is going to be allowed to come into South Africa, etc. All of that. But underneath that, they're having their own conversations about energy security and energy transition.
Yeah. So currently in the country, we have two companies which manufacture solars, but I don't know. I'm not quite certain about if they do. These two companies are not meeting the demands. Where do they procure the rest to meet the demand that we have in the country? I'm not sure if it's coming from the west or the east, but we have two local manufacturers that are manufacturing solar plants, solars in the country currently. But I'm not quite sure of where they're buying it. So something that I have to find out on where the majority of this solar the government is getting from. But if it's coming from also Putin, or if it's coming from Russia or the east side of the world, well, it also brings a very interesting dynamic also, because remember they tried to do nuclear energy back around 2017, 2016, and then it was refused because of Russia was primarily going to be funding it. But right now, there was an agreement recently from the energy sector ministry in the country that they are going to allow for the construction of a nuclear power plant in South Africa soon, probably in 2 years' time.
Okay. Well, I want to come, more specifically to the just transition element of this particular conversation. And you said it started to enter into the conversation basically in during the transition to Ramaphosa's government, basically. Was that introduced primarily by the trade unions, or from social movements, or some combination of both?
So, as far as around 2009, 2008, the trade union movements in the country had already started to pick up on the language of just transition, and also campaigning for that, green energy and the important part of that. But it's very important to note that this administration of Ramaphosa is not really speaking about just transition. They want to, their end goal is to privatize Eskom. So they're saying, no, actually, Eskom is struggling. Look at it. We don't even have electricity. 8 hours without electricity. So now let's unbundle Eskom. So unbundling is a fancy word for privatization. Let's unbundle it and allow for other players to generate electricity for us. So I, as Phethani, was coming from a village somewhere in Limpopo in South Africa. How am I going to compete with Johan Rupert, who is the richest man in the continent, to be able to provide electricity to the to Eskom? So most of these people who are independent power producers are being roped in, and also it's in a level of crony capitalism, where many people who have connections to people in government are the ones who are getting these deals to be able to take part in providing this shortage of power into into the grid. So in essence, at the end of the day, they are going to be selling electricity to Eskom, and Eskom will have to increase the tariffs to charge the consumers. But in essence, uh, in the at the level of trade union side and social movements, we have for a long time been mobilizing and organizing around the energy of the impending climate crisis. Well, although it's already happening, it's already unfolding in some parts of the continent, especially recently there were floods in Malawi, and actually we just had a tornado recently in Durban in South Africa just last week, and it shows the agency of the question of climate change in the continent as a whole. But overall, beyond and above, we remain underdeveloped, and many people will say, actually, oh no, look at the first world, look at the West. They developed through coal. We're going to ban coal. We're going to use coal because they're not willing to come to the party. And them coming in speaking about the question of just transition, it does not come from a playing field which is level, but it's also a level of dictating. I mean, how much realistically is the third world contributing to the carbon footprint as compared to the first world? I mean, that is the reality. I remember when I was young, when I was still in high school, reading about the Kyoto Protocol, and I remember strictly that America did not sign it.
That's right.
But they're the leaders. They are the leaders of of this conversation today about just transition. No, we must transition. We must move beyond that. But in essence, in our country, um, the kind of just transition that we imagine coming from the trade union movements, from the social movement, is different from the one that the state is speaking about. And in terms of the state, it's all about trying to get more people to privatize it, more and more privatization, but also not a collectivized kind of energy production, because these are some of the discourses that people have brought up, that actually we can get different households to be able to contribute to the supply of energy to to the national grid. But that has not been what the government has been saying. The government has been saying, let's unbundle Eskom, allow private players to come in who will produce electricity and sell it to Eskom. However, they deem fit in terms of the tariffs and the monies that they are going to charge. That is the essence of what's really happening. But as the trade union movements and the organizations of the left, we have been mobilizing and protesting about the issues of climate change, although it has not really gained much traction as a political discourse. Mostly, I should say, let me not generalize and say the global south, but in South Africa, I will not say it's many people who normally think about energy crisis. Not the energy crisis, but the climate change issue as the most impending thing that is going to happen in the next few years. Because most of us, what they are worried about, bread and butter issues. Where is my next meal going to come from? Although the climate crisis represents the highest challenge that we can face in terms of bread and butter issue, because if nature is decides that it wants to end us, it can end us at any time.
Yeah. No, now thank you for bringing that up, because one of the things that, like in the title of this, the uses and misuses, there's, I would say in the last 10 years, the Obama on the U.S. side, which frames a lot of this conversation, whether we like it or not, the elements of the Obama administration started to lean towards in on a lot of that usage. And one of the things, our side of the left of the social movement in the United States, we were always trying to push for clarity, so that particularly members of the trade union don't get caught up in their rhetoric and actually look at the substance of their program. And a large part of the program of how the United States and certain elements, particularly out of Europe, are using this just transition framework, and particularly arguing with countries in the global south, the third world, to try to make certain types of transition, is so that they keep the kind of technological and competitive edge on being able to then sell new technologies, right? That the global south would have to buy from them in order to make this transition, right? So it's about maintaining the unequal exchange, the unequal power dynamics within the overall imperialist system. And so that's one of the reasons why I was saying, to be clear for the audience, to try to make sure what I'm getting at by trying to make these distinctions, because there's at least a good number of the conversations, I would say the majority of conversations I know, is that the root of the just transition conversation comes from workers, right? Primarily workers in the energy sector, starting with the United States, but became, very quickly, elements of it became a very global conversation, and rightfully so. But there are, at least rhetorically, left leaning, or there were rhetorically left leaning governments who bought into some of that. Some of it, I think, is real, or some attempts at it were real. I mean, if we could look at, I think for instance, what Hugo Chavez was trying to do, shortly before his death, towards trying to create an office which was trying to kind of plan a just transition and do a level of eco socialist kind of planning and transition. Some of that has been retained, a bit under Maduro, to my knowledge. I think there are some similar efforts, to a certain degree by Cuba. But there's also the reality of what they have to deal with, which is the daily bread and butter issue of the vast majority of their people, and how they have to go about utilizing the reserves that they have to be able to sustain themselves in markets which are, profoundly unequal in terms of balance of trade, in terms of access to credit, uh, um, production capacity, you name it. That's there that people have to deal with. And so one of the misuses that I've been really on my end, really trying to warn a lot of our allies about, and argue for, even in the U.S. context, is we have to be really clear about giving fanfare to certain language which doesn't actually mean what we intend it to mean, when it's particularly coming from certain nation states. The United States, I think, being kind of the chief amongst them, but at least during the Obama and now the Biden administration, and that we have to really interrogate what they are pushing and they're promoting, whether it's a Green New Deal or something within the just transition. They aren't articulating anything that is not going to challenge the ability of the United States government and all the different capital interests that it represents and protects, to maintain their kind of position and advantage on a global stage. So we need to be, this is when we said, like, the uses and misuses, how this is being framed, to really kind of keen in on that. So one of the things I just wanted to, give also folks kind of a, if you can, but kind of a sense of, um, just give us a breakdown of where the ANC and the tripartite movement is at on this question of, South Africa's overall kind of energy future, given Ramaphosa, who comes out of the minor struggle, who comes out of the Black consciousness movement, um, but became one of the richest men on the planet, um, from flipping tail, as we would say, and getting into a lot of the investments in those very same mines that he once worked at and once was a leader in the unions of representing, and is very much a part of the extractive economy, particularly on a regional, a state and regional level, but also on a global level. So with him at the head, where is this going, relative to a build out? I mean, you laid out some of the let's call them kind of short sighted errors of the Mbeki administration, and how they disregarded the information that was provided to them by Eskom and I'm sure others about what was needed. But where are they going now in light of, kind of the global positioning that they're trying to situate themselves as, particularly relative to this conversation about BRICS? And for those of you in our audience who don't know what BRICS is, right? BRICS um, is I would call it a loose alliance that is composed, trading alliance composed of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They're going to be having a meeting. Members of this alliance are going to be having what is being at least articulated
in
in
September.
mainstream. Say it again. Yeah, they're going to be having a meeting in South Africa soon, very soon, and a good part of this conversation is being framed around the diplomatic crisis relative to Ukraine, trade balances relative to this kind of rising markets, particularly of India and China in particular, but also this kind of energy supply and utilization. So South Africa is kind of sitting in the middle of that and just wondering what is the thinking there? What is the ANC government thinking about its own, kind of needs and relative to being able to push uh, uh, some geopolitical issues within the context of this particular alliance and framework. I think there's a delay or there's a pause. You didn't hear everything I said, Phethani? Phethani, can you hear me? We're still having some trouble.
Yeah, I'm here. I can still hear you.
You can still hear me? No, so I was saying, can you give us just briefly a
Yes.
outline of how the ANC government is seeing kind of its energy future and how it's trying to enter into the world stage relative to all the challenges that are being kind of confronted, primarily being prompted by this inter-imperialist contest that's going on in Ukraine. You had to switch to another
Yeah,
device,
can you hear me?
Donnie? Yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, great. So,
yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so in terms of the ANC and their so-called strategic alliances, it has been sort of like not a very clear policy position in terms of whom they want to align with. They're in BRICS. They're still trying to appease the West. They have not really made a clear policy position on who really are they aligning with. I mean, of course, in the global scale of things in terms of the politics, and also that also has impact on how we frame our understanding of just transition and on whose interest do we want that to serve. So for us, as you mentioned, the upcoming BRICS meeting, which is happening in September, there's been a kind of wishy-washy policy position. In fact, within even the party itself, where some people are saying, no, actually, let's bring Putin must come. Others saying that if he comes, we're going to arrest him, and all that. But it just shows you that the Tripartite Alliance itself has been kind of caught in between in terms of whom, of really what is their political and policy position in terms of how do they frame post-1994 South Africa, where you found that the Communist Party of South Africa has been heavily involved in the neoliberal. They have been heavily involved in the neoliberal project of the ANC since 1994, but yet still claim that they are aligned with the leftist progressive movements in the world and also in the country as a whole. And underlying this, the energy crisis that we are facing in the country shows completely how deeply entrenched they are in these challenges of the neoliberal policies of the ANC. So, in essence, one could say without fear and contradiction that the ANC, in their framing of just transition and also the kind of world that we're trying to reimagine beyond that, have chosen a neoliberal approach and also the privatization of energy, a very important sector in the country for development, has been given away to the capitalist class, who will do as they please and extract more and more profits out of the very important sector of energy, which should be a basis of our development. And looking into issues of transitioning justly, it is not really a policy position of the Tripartite Alliance itself that do we leave coal or do we not leave coal. So this power plant that I'm telling you of, which has been decommissioned, has been decommissioned not out of the what I will say that a policy resolution of the ANC, because there's still very much very obvious public spat between especially the energy minister Blade Zimande, not Blade Zimande, Gwede and also the president Cyril Ramaphosa. In fact, last week there was an agreement which was being signed with Finland, I think, and he refused to sign. The Minister of Energy refused to attend the briefing meeting of signing the agreement because he felt that he was not consulted as the Minister of Energy. But we know that at the bottom of it is not about that. It's political differences which are emerging outside of the ANC, that they are trying to push out coal, but in favor of private producers who are also going to try and use coal themselves. Just that they want to take away that responsibility from the national grid, Eskom, and put it in the hands of private independent power producers. On the other side, we're finding out that issues related to the fact that now there's this contradiction about the fact that no, actually we're going to commission the construction of a nuclear power plant, which is one of the solutions which have been proposed. But in essence, one can see that there is an internal power struggle amongst the top leaders of the Tripartite Alliance, and there's an amorphous policy position about what to do next, how to resolve this crisis once and for all. Because right now, in the past 2 weeks or so, as I said earlier on, to reiterate that we don't have an engineering problem in terms of electricity generation in the country. We don't have it. It's a political problem. Because in the past 2 or 3 weeks, we have been experiencing, in fact, we have had too much electricity that we don't even know what to do with it. In the past 3 months or so, we're experiencing 8 hours of power cuts. Right now, you can just have 2 hours of it. So a miracle has happened in the past 2 weeks, where now there's a lot of electricity and the power stations are performing at maximum. But it is because that we are going to elections next year, so that they're trying to make sure that they balance out issues and try to win elections. That's why they are even bringing more and more electricity now to the public, so that people will not complain much more. But in essence, the decision, the GEAR policy of 1996, I'm sure you know about the GEAR policy of 1996, which decided to privatize most of our SOEs. It started with our steel producing company. It was privatized in the late 90s. And then our telecommunication company, Telkom, it was privatized. Everything else, right now, 2 years back, we just sold our national airline, the South African Airways. It's no longer being owned by the government, it's privatized. So the move towards the privatization of Eskom does not surprise us at all, because it has always been the kind of modus operandi, or the kind of the kind of thing that they were trying to do to make sure that all SOEs are going to be privatized. So once that is done, and if you privatize electricity, you have hit a jackpot, because everyone needs electricity. Everyone needs electricity, and even if it is expensive or class expensive as everyone else, well, people are going to try and buy it. We have to buy it because we have to survive. We have to cook. We have to have heat during cold winters. But essentially, it is not surprising that the policy position of the ANC the energy crisis that we're facing in the country looks towards more privatization. But it does not speak about it. When it speaks about just transition, it speaks about it as a rhetoric, not really the just transition that is going to take care of the interests of workers. That is where we are.
Right. Well, I want to end on, take a few minutes to ask you, what is the way forward? How do you think, and those that you work with, from the Walter Rodney group, what do you think is the way forward relative to, the energy self-sufficiency, self-determination, and it being a kind of a critical resource that's going to be needed to do any form of autonomous, let alone liberatory development within the country?
So for me, the issue is that we must be able to understand the importance of the energy sector as a driving force of economic activity and economic change in the country. And for us to watch that to be sold into private hands will be very disastrous, and also not favorable to the working class. But the kind of transition that we imagine, or that we envisage, is a transition that puts the interests of the workers at heart, at the center of all this transition. That workers are not going to be left out, and they're not going to be left behind in terms of the new technology that we're going to be working on. But most importantly, also for me, is that also in terms of the science, the advancement of science part, that we have to deal with the peculiar challenge of baseload, because right now in the renewable sector we have not really resolved that challenge. It is very important, because the bourgeoisie and the neoliberals are like, look, no, we're not going to ban coal because you guys cannot provide baseload. So if we are able to put much more research into that, especially in the science sector, in the science space, to try and resolve the issue of base load. Obviously, we have to transition coal, but also when it comes to the power imbalances that we have to deal with the global north and the global south, it has been a very tricky and abusive relationship that we have had. I mean, in 2009 in Copenhagen, we met different countries, first world, third world, to speak about just transition and to resolve the issue of global warming. They promised to put in $100 million a year to this cause, but more and more yearly they continue still to extract surplus value from the global south, and that cripples our economic development. And people are going to say, actually, but look at Europe, they developed through coal. Let's also use coal. So if we are really trying to transition coal, we have to get to a point where we have to challenge the global scales of power and the questions of imperialism, which are very important, because we cannot be able to resolve it outside the question of imperialism. We cannot be able to resolve outside the question of imperialism and the continued underdevelopment and the hogging of technology from the global north. That leaves us with no choice except to look towards coal. But if there is, it's the same thing which was happening during the pandemic. They were refusing to give us vaccines. So no, we're not going to give you vaccines. You have to pay for them in the midst of a global crisis. So in this elongated and protracted struggle of just transition, they have just proven that they have no interest at heart of trying to protect the earth and the environment, but the importance for the first world has always been trying to extract more and more profits out of the global south. And the strategy or the political strategies that we can use, which are important, are at the level of organizing. And how do we organize these people, people in who are thinking that the most important thing for them is to get a job, is to have food on the table. But how do we incorporate in the language of just transition and the discourse of just transition into the day-to-day language of organizing and trying to reimagine a better world for the poor and the working class? That's what we must do, to try and instill the idea or the understanding of the importance of why do we need just transition, why is it important, and the challenges and the issues that we're facing due to the question of the impending doom of global warming.
All right. Well, I'm in alignment with that. A lot more we could ask, but I want to respect your time. So in this today, we'll try to bring you back on to go on some more depth on a couple of other things that you had. So I just want to say, thank you for sticking with us. We had some more challenges again today on the technology.
Yeah,
so
we did.
For those of you who are listening to this, are going to be listening to a recording, just stick through it. Definitely, dig in deeper into what Phethani just offered. Definitely do your homework in studying these issues in some greater detail. I will again repeat, I think the case of South Africa is one that we all need to be looking at and studying, because I think so many of the contradictions are how would you say, so ripe and sharp there to learn from, particularly given for those of us on the left, many lessons we have to draw about those who kind of, what's the phrase, who talk left but walk right in all practice and reality. And what do we need to do from an organizing perspective to build our base, to build our strength, and make sure that we walk the path that are necessary to get us where we want to go. So again, Phethani, thank you on behalf of the Institute for Social Ecology and for Cooperation Jackson for joining us. We want to encourage everybody to stay tuned with us in our series about ecology and race and social justice. We're getting back to our monthly schedule of doing these conversations and trying to go in depth. Hopefully our next one will be more in line with our tradition of being able to have folks come on and ask questions directly of our guests. So we'll get back to their format. But other than that, we will see everybody again in the next few weeks. This is Kali Akuno signing off.
Yeah, thank you.